Knobloch's Dance presents Dance Behind the Screen, Process Production and Social Media. Hey knowers, welcome to our podcast. We are Knobloch's Dance, a social media-based company. We strive to say no to the box. We connect interdisciplinary art, technology, and artists to re-envision the process of art making and sharing.
Welcome back to Dance Behind the Screen podcast. We're your co-hosts, Azaria
and Reyna.
And today we spoke with Judith Sánchez Ruíz.
Yes, who I actually got to meet at the Texas Dance Improvisational Festival in 2018 when it was being held at Texas Women's University. And which was really nice because I got to take her class, and super fast paced, constantly going, never thinking about what you were doing next. And there was something freeing about that. So I really, really appreciated my first experience with her for sure.
Yeah, Judith is an improviser as well as teacher, choreographer, and she's a director of her own company, the Judiths Sánchez Ruíz Company. She was born in Cuba. She spent many years in New York, and she's currently based in Berlin, Germany. She's worked with greats such as Trisha Brown Dance Company and Deborah Hay, among many others. And if you're interested in finding her work,
you can go ahead and look her up in Vimeo.
Yeah, she has several of her full works listed there if you're trying to curate performances or you want to bring in an artist. She also teaches. And if you want to see her perform or take classes, she'll be in the States in October in San Francisco with Hope Moore and the Bridge Project.
So check her out.
And without further ado,
here we go.
Enjoy the show. Welcome, Judith, to our podcast.
Yay! Welcome, Judith.
Hello, everybody.
So, Judith, you have such an interesting career, and I think we all want to know, and we want you to let our audience know how you got to where you're currently at.
What I'm working right now?
Yeah, like what is how did you get to where you're at? What was your career path?
Well, it's a very long one. But, if I have to, because it's from the past to the present, and I think it's a long, labyrinth path. So it was, I don't know, I think it was based on a lot of work and a lot of belief and a lot of isolation as well. You have to go through the tunnel to kind of start finding things and believe it that you can make it happen. And I think that's, it's from the school in Cuba, basically, 7 years to professional companies all around the world. And I'm now into choreography and teaching and trying very hard to sell my work in Europe.
So can you maybe tell us a little bit more about your childhood or growing up in Cuba and in dance schools there?
Yes. This is interesting. I was selected by the government team of workers working for athletes in Cuba when I was 6 years old. They came to school in my neighborhood. Family, there's no one that is an artist or is in a sport or anything, they are normal middle-class workers. And suddenly they said, do you know how to do the split? And I was like, what is that? And they did it, and I was like, okay. And I did it, I remember very clearly still that it was, like, split, open your legs and I did it, and that was the moment I discovered that actually I was super flexible.
Wow, that is so cool.
All my joints, including, my arms, everything, all my joints were like totally flexible, and they were like, oh yes, you are, so from that moment, 6 years old, I started in gymnastic, rhythmical gymnastic. And they were basically going like a school, like primary school, and then from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, sports. And I never stopped. That was the beginning of working full day for the rest of my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And after that, they were I was very privileged because it looks that they liked it, what they saw. and they start kind of preparing me independently of the normal the municipal, like the neighborhood team. They were kind of giving me a special training outside. I remember going to living rooms of a special house to have a coach.
Wow.
Them. And they prepared me like a very special to go to competition, and they were just testing me. And after that, they was like, oh, next year for the third year in primary school, you are going to this, you get the scholarship in this Eduardo Sabori, like a special sports school, very far away from the center. And it was a big thing for my family because they have to decide if at 9 years old I was going, I was allowed to going alone, 1 hour ride out of the center of the, in the city, and back around 8:00 because it was so far. It was you have to be there at 8 and you have to come back and you arrive home at 7:30. So it was full day training and primary school, but that was a lot of discipline and a lot of training, and it looks like the Judith of that time didn't, I was very special, feeling that this special treatment, and the school was incredible. At the same time, I went to my mom after that year and I said, Mama, this is a little bit too much. And my mom was, my family was actually very supportive. And she said, what do you want? I said, I don't know, but I feel like alone, like I don't have childhood anymore. I don't think I said actually this word. It's something familiar, kind of
similar.
Yeah.
And he said, like, Mama, I want to leave the school, and my mom was so ashamed to tell my coach that she sent my aunt. She couldn't go pick up my papers, she had to convince my aunt to do it. And it was a big thing for my family because they were shy about it. They were like, how come, but you want to go? Okay, we let you go, but somebody has to talk to the director of the school because my mom couldn't do it.
Right.
And it's sad in a way, but that was the beginning of me kind of knowing what I was looking for in a very, inner way.
Yeah.
And after that, I said to my mom, okay, what can we were, my family was like, what are you going to do now? Because your bodies was super trained, how you have been trained for a couple of years. And everybody started talking about ballet.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's like 9, almost 10. Ballet, Alicia Alonso Ballet schools in Cuba start at 9. So I was a year behind.
Did you meet her, Alicia Alonso?
No, never. I saw them a lot on TV, but I never saw some shows and she was around, but I don't remember an image of actually being close.
Okay.
I don't remember. But I was at the school. The school was also at the schools in Cuba. They're quite nice, especially in the 80s, or end of the 70s. And it was kind of like I entered in the school, but it was the only possibility to enter the school was at 9. So I started studying my whole primary school, 4th grade, in going back to my neighborhood school. And then at 6 o'clock, I have to take a bus and go into the ballet class that was in another neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
So I started training ballet from 6 to 9 p.m. Every day for 2 years.
Wow.
And I, of course, I also rejected because I was like coming from a sport that is so dynamic and is so, somehow straightforward to competition. Right. And starting ballet that you remember is like 8 counts to do just your arms in 2 positions.
Right.
So it was literally like, oh, Mama, I don't think after a year and a half, in the second year, I was also complaining. I was a little bit like, oh, I'm not going to, I felt that I was not going to make it.
Right.
How? It was something was telling me this also didn't work. It's not for me. Anyway, and then, we're at the same position and suddenly somebody from the job of my mom was talking about modern dance. And that the last weekend of auditions of the National Modern Dance School. So timing was perfect. So I arrived in these huge auditions when I actually knew everybody because everybody has been, Cuba is very small. So it's the same girls, the same generation in gymnastics, in ballet, in modern dance. So I arrived and I was telling my family, I was like, oh, this one was the champion of this. This one is a great in ballet. And my mom said, I think we should go. I'm not gonna make it.
No.
it was very funny, but I made it. I entered the school, and it was from 1983 until 1990. So it was 7 years. A lot of testing, a secondary and pre-universitary. 7 years, but it was a lot of constant. It was very special. Kids just enter like 15 students, because it was the national school that was completely different. It's an art school, so you enter and nobody was using uniform. It was a total freedom. It was like the University of the Arts. It was everywhere, painting everywhere, theater people rehearsing in the living room of the, on the place. It was a completely another universe. I fell in love with the school, and I loved so badly that I told my mom I wanted to be, how you say when you sleep, like boarding school? Like I wanted to sleep there. I don't want to, So I stayed. Actually, it was like a boarding school for 7 years. I stayed there.
So is that why you chose maybe New York for its modern scene, having found this like love of modern in Cuba?
It was very different, and we're talking about a time that America and Cuba were in really bad relations. Well, they have been.
Right.
But that was a particularly more resistance and more prohibited, because when socialism and communism was very high.
Right.
And it was not, America was not, especially my family, my mom was very communist. She was actually the president of the party, the Communist Party in her job. So that affected me in two ways. One way, it was not religious in my household at all, any kind, not the Afro-Cuban one, not the church or anything. And the other thing, it was like America didn't exist in my childhood at all. You think news, but this is far away from whatever you think about it.
Oh, wow.
And so New York was not a possibility or no a dream or no a vision of anything until the musicians started arriving to Cuba in the jazz festival, and one of them invited me. It was
wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were invited to New York by this jazz musician, and then tell us a little bit more about that. What was your first impression of New York when you first got there?
Well, first it was walking in Central Park thinking the enemy is looking at me. I'm here. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But also I was arriving in a very inspiring environment of innovative composers, musicians, Steve Coleman, and all around me were great people. And so I was very artistic. And I was I was in the knitting factory that disappeared years back in New York. It was this amazing place, and I was doing a concert with them. And then David Zambrano was in New York, and he presented me to Jennifer Monson and a lot of people that I already met them because they have been in Cuba before. So it was, it was, my first impression was great. Somehow it was directly to the same environments that I had in Cuba, artists, surrounded by artists or people who were doing things.
Oh, wow. And so I'm wondering, so you're in New York, and how was modern dance different from Cuba to New York, or were there any difference? Yeah.
Well, it was a huge difference because in Cuba, we need to think that the only people who could be a dancer were the ones that were in the school. In Cuba, there is no, well, now it's a little bit different, but at that time, there was no studios. So, people who never make it into the audition, never enter in the school, they didn't have the chance to become, just the other chance was cabaret.
Oh, wow.
Classes or stuff like that. No studios that normal people say, I want to be a dancer and just training in the studio. This was not a possibility. So I was just trained to see around me people that were very trained from the school, or ballet students or professionals, but that was very narrow community. In New York, when I arrived and the first time I went to Jackson Church, I was totally confused. I was like, going on here? What is this?
Yeah. Which is so funny because I feel like in my mind, I really associate you with like that kind of performance theater style.
Yeah.
No, but it was incredible because while living in New York and learning, adapting and be flexible about new things, all kinds of new things, I also start getting flexible about why was Jackson happening, what was the need. It was all kind of performers, all kind of artists who need to say something. Right. And sometimes it was political, it was sexual oriented, it was whatever, it was the context, it was the need of people materializing their dreams. And that was, we didn't have that chance. I think now in Cuba it's a little bit more flexible, many years passed, but it was an understanding of the, the result of another social life, another interaction between people.
You are listening to Navox Dance.
And is this where you came into contact with Deborah Hay and Trisha Brown Dance Company, or is that later on in life?
Well, it was later on because I arrived first in New York, invited by Steve in 1997. And immediately it's very interesting because before I left Cuba, I was already doing choreography and I was already doing a lot of work in the house and doing stuff. And one of my colleagues from music, I was really, really into the music environment, the music community. He sent one of the videos of my work. It was a piece that I did with 3 musicians in Cuba. And it was my first I did 2 pieces that were kind of something in the community in Cuba at that time. And he sent a video to Stanford University and we got a scholarship.
Wow.
So it was coincidentally that I was invited to Steve Coleman in April, and this scholarship arrived in May or June. So in August, I was in Stanford University with a scholarship.
Wow.
What? That is so cool.
Yeah, I was really, by the Doris Foundation, it was supporting this. And so it was a very important jazz group from Cuba, that were all my friends, plus me as a choreographer, kind of collaborated music and dance and presenting a workshop in Stanford. And that was, we're talking about 1997. I didn't even speak English at that time at all.
Right. Wow. That's
so
awesome.
That was my most, the beginning of everything. And then for the English, for many, New York was still very wild at that time. And I was my partner was a white Spanish Cuban, third generation of Spanish from the province, from Santa Clara.
Right.
And it happens that he also had the possibility to come. He was in Canada and he said Stanford, so we invite him for the scholarship to be part of this residency in Stanford and walking in New Jersey, actually in Hoboken, because we were visiting David Zambrano in Hoboken. We had a lot of this bad look from people in the streets, and it was hard for me. It was I was like, what? I didn't understand anything. I was like, what's going on? People is mad at me because I am with a white guy. I was.
Oh, you said Hoboken, New Jersey?
Yes.
That's where my mom is from. And yes, that was a very white community at the time.
Yeah.
So it was, I started, it was a fast learn process of everything, I was like, oh, this is many things influenced, but I also thought I need, I was looking for a work because I was from Cuba. You don't have anything. I didn't. Right. I happened to not have any family in the United States. All my family is still in Cuba, all of them. So I didn't have any support. It was just work and get some money, but it was a little bit too much to survive. So I started talking to David, and David said, I'm going to help you. So David Zambrano started calling people. And it was very funny because he called Sasha Walsh, and Sasha Walsh said something, she was not interested at that time. And he called Malpelo. There was this company in Girona, Spain, close to Barcelona. And they just gotten a grant to support, to do it was the first moment that they have actually support funding. So they were like, yes, let's invite Judith. They have been in Cuba, so I knew them before. So it was great. They invited me to Barcelona, and I went to Barcelona for 2 years with a work contract. Somebody said, you should go to audition for Trisha Brown. And I was like, I have seen the work. Actually, it was one of the performances that I always went to see and check. But I never with that aspiration. It's very far away from the possibility that might happen someday. And suddenly, the person who asked me that, she came and said, give me a paper and say, there is an audition next week, and this is the address, and this is the email, the telephone number at that. And I was like, wow, this is so precise. It was so like a destiny somehow. Okay, why not? But I really went to the audition. I have to be honest. I thought, I was like, well, it's a free class. Why not? I was really in the back of the audition, my memory of it. And I was like, it's a free class, so I enjoy it very much. It's great. I love the class. I love the phrases that they were teaching at the time. And suddenly they say number 187 or something. And I was like, I wasn't even looking at it. So they have to shut my name and my number like 3 times until I realized that was my number.
Oh, crap. That's so cool.
Yeah, so that was my how I entered in Trisha. And at the time when I entered, some people came to me and say, you know what, they never even look at it. Somebody after 33 or 35, it's already, before me.
Wow.
There was not even a possibility. So I think I was very lucky because in the moment that I went to the audition, it was 4 main dancers member were leaving. So they were actually opening it up to get more mature people.
Right.
Because they need it.
That's very interesting because I do associate modern dance with being a little bit more open to age. So it's interesting that you still were kind of breaking through that age barrier about youth and dance.
I think at that time, we're talking about 2006. At that time, the companies still were very strict with what they were looking for. And I think my understanding at that time, what I got from Trisha is that most of the time the dancers were graduated from Tisch University, or from the United States. So they already knew release. For me, it was completely new. I was able to enter because I have improvisation skills. And I was soft in my joints and I was researching a lot. So I was kind of adapting very fast with a lot of experience already in the stage and a lot of experience as well, a little bit in the company that I was in Barcelona, in Spain, with partnering. And I think that was what was good, to enter the skills that I had already.
So now you're in Germany and you have your own company and you teach your own workshops. I'm really curious about A, your artistic vision for your company, and B, a particular workshop called Your Own God. I have been trying to figure this out through like all of your promotion videos. So if you could tell us a little bit about your artistic vision for your company, and then maybe like just let me know what this Your Own God workshop is all about and how I can maybe embody that in my own time.
Okay. The company was in need of credibility, and also it was related to funding because in 2010, when I left Trisha, 2009, I started working a lot on my own and I got a lot of engagement in New York. It was a very important year in New York, 2011, 2010. I got the 25 magazine and all this, and funding by the Rockefeller, Guggenheim Museum, Work in Progress. So,
wow, that's so
I got all this. I was like, wow, it was a practical decision. Say, okay, I have to, organize all the money and organize myself to present work and invite and hire people. So it was like, okay, let's do a company because the funding people could see that I'm serious. And that was I created a Judith Sánchez Company in New York. And it was based also in having a laboratory, having a place that I could actually explore. Have a pressure from what was happening around me. I was more like, this is really a place that I could really research and invite collaborators that I really wanted to invite. And, so I started with this idea. It was I got a lot of invitations to do site specific as well. So the company was related to all this interdisciplinary and site specific and being able to present work in any places that I want at the time. But also it has inside something important for me. It was like I always was saying for a while that I wanted to create art that my grandma could understand. And
that's sweet.
Is like a dance is always, especially from my childhood or Cuba or what I knew, was very elitist, and everybody was coming to you, normal, ordinary people from, they were coming to you and say, but I don't understand what you're doing. And I said, you don't have to understand, you have to feel it. It's sensitive. It's not about explain. You don't have to explain what you saw, Right. So I wanted to create a work that it relates to the audience directly. So in that way, that's the reason I fell in love with improvisation, because it allowed me to do that. And that's why I create work that is for alternative places. So it's not necessarily for a stage. So because I was able to also explore the idea from casual actions to metaphysical art, like it creates this passing from one to another. How can we show the audience when art is happening, the process of it? And that was the beginning of me. And I think it has been very important in all my works from that time until now, that I still kind of talking to the audience is like, it's complex, definitely. But there is a moment that I really look at them and I say, I am like you. I am a person. And I just happen to have these skills that I push it to another level, that it create an energy that suddenly is artistic. Not, I don't want to separate. I don't want to represent. I don't want to show to the audience that you cannot do what I'm doing. Feel it. So that was kind of always has been as a very important in the concept of any choreography work I made. And that's one thing. The other thing is, after arriving in Berlin, Berlin, I have to say how I moved here first, because it's
yes, tell us that.
Yeah. I moved here because I was invited by Sasha Waltz in 2011, and it happens to I divorced in that year. So I was, when 2010, 2011 was a flourishment in my work, and also the acceptance of the community in New York. I still very appreciated. Suddenly both of us as a partners were, crumbling. So success brought this separation of perceptions of art, perception of life. And I was like, how I'm gonna make it as a choreographer with a 5 years old in New York?
Right. Wow.
I was
Yeah.
And especially, I don't want to get so into it, but I have to get into being a mother and being an artist. And it was a lot of problem with child support, and this is what happened with us mothers sometimes when we divorce. So I was really, really in a spot of, wow, what is the future for me?
Right. How do I do all of this?
Exactly. And I was imagining at that time also, I was very happy with my work. So I was like, I don't want to stop now. I'm going to work in a store.
Right.
So it was this very thought, very thick thought about what is my future? What is the practicality of all of this? And inside that, it happens to Sasha was at band. She was coming to present work, and we met in Cuba a long time ago, and we started hanging out for Chelsea, going to galleries, and it was super nice and super, actually we were talking all the time about being a mother, having the kids, buying stuff together for the kids. It was this amazing time together. And suddenly she said, why don't you come, Berlin was starting to getting into very popular in Europe. And she said, why don't you come to Berlin? Berlin is great. And I was like, it was not in my dreams at that time at all. I was actually very happy with what was happening with me in New York. I was just like, how can I make it, But then she said, come to Berlin next spring, and I invite you to present your work in the theater that she had, and you teach to the company. It was my first time teaching an international company, and it was my first kind of out of New York presenting my work.
Don't forget to say no to the box.
Cuba or New York or Latin American, at that time. So it was a great experience, and it was so nice. I was like, but I didn't really came back to that until 6 months later. I was still not convinced, so I never answered her for 6 months. Because I was still, Baryshnikov gave me a residency at that time.
Wow.
I have still a lot of engagement in New York, so I was not really, I was thinking about it, but I was not really taking the decision yet until I signed the divorce. I the papers of the divorce, and I was like, okay, now you are leaving New York. That was really the step. I was like, now I know I'm not gonna make it. So I called Sacha, and she was incredibly supportive, because I said, oh, that contract is still on, because now I have an answer for you.
Oh, wow.
I moved 2 months after that. I was like, what's going on? What am I gonna do? I have so much information. And that was amazing, because that was a moment of really confronting myself as a performer, choreographer, and teacher, and say, well, what do you really want to do, independently of what is popular?
Oh, wow.
Right.
What do you really see? How do you see yourself? And it was really, I call the year of disintoxication, because I have to clean up my perspective. I have to really work on what speak to me as an artist again. And I found all this. I think Your Own God is still 2 years later, came from going to teach workshops all over the world, like Asia, many different places, Norway, Asia, everywhere, and realize what was happening in this side as well, realize that the students were a little bit lost. There's many students that just follow workshops everywhere, and there's lack of feedback, or a lack of corrections. So they were full of habits. I was confronting how can I help them, and I start saying, like, my first instinct was like, you have to be your own God. You have to find your own path. I'm not gonna teach you to become me. I'm not gonna teach you to have 4 copies of me or 15 copies of me. I'm gonna teach you how to find yourself. And from God came exactly from finding sources of creativity through exercises that breaks your habits. And I think it was very related to myself as a performer, because it was exactly what I was doing in another hand on my own. I was going to the studio to create choreography, and I started this solo in 2017 in Caje. And I was like, what am I gonna do now? As a solo, I have done so many solos. And I was like, and it was exactly like, I really spent like 6 months going to the studio and figured out what else, and that was the moment I decided I don't want to do more mechanical movement or more material based on memory. I'm really finding something in improvisation. So I start kind of inventing this idea in my mind that I'm gonna do a new kind of choreography. Is the structural improvisation based on digested information, layering, and ramifications. So I put all this huge complex equation in choreography, and I made it. So it was, these two came from the kind of the same period that I was really looking for solutions or concrete ideas or concrete concepts that allow me to define who I wanted to be at that time. And it was also related to what was happening around me. It was Europe was full of acrobatics, full of very styles, mainstream.
Right.
And I was like, well, I have a completely different background, a completely different social political research and need in my intellect and also in my body. So I have to, even if I don't get the money. It was. This is important because people said, "How can you do it?" I said, "Well, imagine that I left Cuba. My family is still there. So the sacrifice has always been part of. It has been all the time with me. So I was not afraid to leave a big company that has amazing infrastructure and travel all over the world all the time. I was not afraid to go to zero." Because I have a lot of mentors and a lot of great artists, especially in New York and Cuba, that I saw being poor while being great.
Yeah. Right.
So I have this amazing mirror, that I saw so many great artists that not necessarily were famous. That was a good moment for me to think about them and say, you know what, just keep going. The class is empty, but you should keep working.
Right.
It really served me at the time to have this influence, because that was what kept me going. And now, 2019, 2020, I can say that it really paid off somehow, because little by little, step by step, now the class are full. I cannot complain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have advice for people who are maybe feeling like you were feeling, who know that they want to kind of follow their own artistic voice, but don't really know how to go about that? What would you say to those people?
I think it's important to first feed your intellect, because if you feed your intellect, you are a little bit more into the contemporary, into the situation that you are living in the moment. I think art comes from what you experience. I got completely lost, but it's
no, you're good. Don't worry about it.
That you are living. It's especially now that so many things are happening. It's important. It's not, for example, the difference between United States or Cuba or Latin America and Europe, that I have been analyzed very hard to understand, my new path or what I have to do, is like I think in Cuba, Latin America, or United States, what I saw, or what my experience was, that many of the artists that I saw that I really like, the art was coming from a social-political need. They need to present that work because it was very strong to say what they were saying. And in Europe, for some reason, there is so much more money in some countries, and they support art. And there is a hierarchy and there is a tradition. So the money comes from if you graduate for certain school, or the money comes because you left the famous company. So not necessarily make you a choreographer, not necessarily make you an artist that have something to say to us, or not necessarily come from a very strong need to transform the community, to transform the society. So this is something that I was like, oh, okay, so it's different. And and also I think in New York, I saw a lot of platforms for new choreographers, or choreographers that were coming from any part of the world. Choreographers coming from Haiti or from Jamaica or from China or from any place. It was a platform at that time. I think now has changed a little bit. But at the time that I was in New York from 2000 to 2011, I was part of this group of people that were supported. And I received people giving me feedback as a choreographer, and I had a process. It was not important to have a product to sell and being famous. It was important to have your own progress and your own failure, and you were, still there. They still call you. It's not pieces that I present in 11 years in New York were exactly fantastic.
Yeah,
right. Being a choreographer, like being a writer or being a composer, needs a process, and the process includes failing.
Right.
You have to learn from that, and that makes you better, and that develops you concepts. And this is what in Europe, I think is completely different, because there is a work that is support that is not necessarily coming from artists that are intrinsic part of the community. It comes from more hierarchy status.
I got it. Yeah. I understand.
Yeah.
But this is personal, because also my perception as a Cuban Black mother in Europe, it is, with experience, is different how I see everything,
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's almost impossible to sell your work. There is very difficulties in getting supported by funding. My story, if you think about it, is very strange, because I'm from Cuba, but I don't do necessarily Cuban dance work. My adult life was in New York, and I call myself kind of universal. In a way, you cannot categorize what I do.
Right.
You cannot put it in a specific style to sell it. It comes from my experience. So you cannot say it's one or the other. It's just an artist who do choreography.
Yes.
And especially in the last 10 years, Europe has been very into conceptual work, especially Berlin is a lot about no movement. It's a lot of less and less movement. That's the reason that my class, 4 years ago were empty, because movement, and people were like, oh, and I did something. I started the class at that time saying, this is what I'm gonna talk. This is the class about it, and I was kind of giving a speech for people to understand exactly what was my interest, and that served me a lot, because I was was telling people, you know what you're going to learn here? You're going to learn awareness, and you're going to learn how to breathe, and you're going to learn about gravity, and you're going to be precise, and you're going to be improvising. You know, like really, I was improvising. I was trying how to actually say what was going to happen because it was a misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and also it was some places I went to teach at that period, you know, 2016, 2017, that I was completely misinterpreted by students, you know, and it was like, what are you doing? You know, like it was even hard for them to see who I am in terms of, let's say, aesthetics, and then talking about these things. You know, it was a kind of prejudice in a way. And I have to learn how to be diplomatic and how to still keep working. You know, even if you now at that time I was like, no, don't be, you know, don't create a problem, don't go to the director, don't do. But now I see it as it was an aggression, and it was a little bit like prejudice or racist. You know, that's the. And now I realize, you know, I think all these thoughts of I'm more feminist than ever and more, you know, kind of more progressive than ever, it comes from the experience of not being accepted the way I have been accepted everywhere else, or the way I was accepted in New York, or the way I was accepted in other places that I have been, like in Athens or in other, you know, like people see, or in Paris even, that they see what you do and they understand immediately.
Right.
There is not any questions, you know, it's a little bit more direct. You don't defend, you don't have to justify what you do. People appreciate it and people see it.
Create, discuss, and advocate for art. No box dance.
How do you, God, that's so rich. How do you think that is currently informing your work, the work you're creating?
It's changing a lot, actually. It has changed a lot because I think I always evolving. You know, I said I have done so many pieces that they just presented once. That is quite sad. But at the same time, I always get a new idea, so I keep working. I keep doing. That's what I would say to everybody. Just keep working.
Right.
But it has changed a lot because after Sacha, I was doing a duet for a couple of years or around Sacha. And I was like, well, let me be smart. Let me maybe dance with somebody else from the community that everybody knows, and that might give me visibility.
Right.
And actually it was the opposite. It gave me more invisibility. It even made me doubt about me as a performer. It was something about gender, something about, the man is a great dancer, and the woman, well, you know, and I was like, wow, what is going on between male and woman in Europe? What is going on between male and woman in the world in the last 10 years?
Right.
Why when we are in a duet, you have to say that someone is better than the other? What is the art in that? What is? I never thought this as a critique. You know, I never see a work based on the gender of the participants. So I had to really analyze, even I was, because I have to be honest, I always, as a performer, I never have any problem. You know, I always have been kind of privileged, you know, that people invite me. I don't have to fight for a role. Actually, I always recommend to people in companies, never fight for a role. You work, and the work itself is going to bring you what you want, or it's going to bring you the role that you deserve. Don't fight with anybody. Don't get jealous. Don't get competitive. Competitive is with you yesterday.
Right.
It's not about the others. It's about how you progress, how you develop, how you learn more, and actually give to the choreographer what they want. You know, so it was a lot of like there was a moment that was quite sad because I was doing these duets everywhere, and it was like kind of it gave me a lot of doubts about myself as a performer, and I did something quite crazy. I said, like, I want to come back to the United States to present my work. And if they tell me that it's a piece of shit, I'm sorry for the expression. No, you know, I would say I will know. So I did after Trisha died. Actually, it was coincidentally, it was the year that Trisha died. I talked to a few former members that were in Los Angeles, New York, and I said, guys, I'm not gonna wait for the curators. I know that the world is getting crazy, so I'm not gonna wait for the people to invite me. I'm gonna invite me myself. I rented studios in Los Angeles. And I rented a studio in New York, and I went to this piece with Encaje. That was the most, you know, elaborated piece that I have done since I'm in Europe, and it has all the things that I have been working very hard on. So I said, I really want to present this solo. And of course, the solo was 30 minutes. So I was like, I need another 30 minutes. Like, coincidentally, it was the year Trisha was not with us anymore. So I said, I missed all the galas that they did. I was invited, but I couldn't go because I was in Europe. So I said, I would love to do a duet tribute to Trisha, and also I am so grateful forever for being in the company and for meeting her and for performing in her company and with her work. So I was like, this is my gala, this is my tribute. So I invite former members, and I went to Los Angeles, and I did with Laura in Los Angeles, and I did with Judy Melnit and Lance Grace in New York. And I really was interested to do dialogue with the audience, like questions and answers, because I really need to hear if what I'm doing doesn't work. I need to know now.
Right.
Europe has given me all these doubts about myself as a performer somehow that I never felt before, and I was really like, I need to check. And I did it, and it was beautiful.
It's so true that you have such a universal story. I love how you used that word earlier. And I think just your arrival and self-actualization is inspiring for both Reyna and I, but I think also for our listeners, and taking those aspects of just doing the work and continuing to do the work.
100%, yes.
So we do have to begin to wrap up, and we have a section called our Flash 4, where you answer 4 questions in a flash. Are you ready?
Drum roll, right?
Flash 4.
Reyna, I'm going to let you take over the Flash 4.
All right. So, Judith, if you had to recommend a resource to our audience, what would it be? It can be a book, a podcast, someone to follow, a website, a blog.
Study herself or himself. I recommend it, especially now there is so much pressure from the outside. I think working on what you are looking for and feeding that path is the best. There is so many things. Yeah, that's my answer.
Okay. Next, what was the first dance you saw?
Cuba, Danza Abierta, the company that I entered. They were amazing.
Ooh, nice. Do you think social media has a positive influence on the dance world currently? Yes or no?
Not really.
Ooh, okay. What is your favorite social media platform?
Instagram.
I love Instagram.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Judith, would you mind sharing your social media handles with our audience so that they can continue to follow your work?
I think it's my name, Judith Sánchez Ruíz. You can follow me, guys.
Yes,
and that is on
Instagram,
on Facebook. Any other platforms that you're on?
Just Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
Wonderful. It was wonderful talking to you today. I really enjoyed this conversation so much.
Me too.
And hopefully
it was so
have you on the
juicy.
Show again in the future.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope everybody enjoyed the interview and it helps people.
No, it was a wonderful interview.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking your time to tune into Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media at KNOW Box Dance. See you next time, and don't forget to say no to the box.